Our first storyteller, think Zac Efron, think Shira. Robin Ray, go! Come on, yeah! Yeah! There you go.
So this is the coolest I've ever been. And I know that because I had older brothers and sisters, and they're really great about reminding you of how uncool you are throughout your entire life. I gave them lots of fodder because I have mixed-handedness or cross-dominance, and that means that the neural pathways in my brain don't always wire up exactly correctly, and that means that I'm clumsy, and clumsy will smack the cool right off of you anytime, any place, anywhere. So I am wired to make reversals, and I'm wired to really want to be accepted. Hopefully you can relate to that. And it made me a target for manipulation. And the greatest example that I have of this is when I was 12 years old, and my much older sister married a man who was even older than her. And he caught on to this fact that I didn't feel cool and that I needed acceptance. And he took me under his wing, and how cool was that to be 12 and have an adult take an interest in you? And so he taught me how to try to be cool, and he started with things like Camel Lights and cheap beer and Pink Floyd, and then dirty words that I only knew how to maybe spell a little bit at that point. And then he extended those lessons into anatomy and physiology. And I really was not prepared to learn those lessons. But I came from a really tiny town in Tennessee, and we went to church. And so he was smart enough to use the Bible to say, you know, in the Bible, men had multiple wives, and they were often sisters. And so in God's eyes, we're actually married. And I don't know if you have ever tried to deceive a teenager, but it's quite easy. So if it's on your bucket list, I suggest you replace it with something a little more challenging. He was not that kind of guy, and so the lessons continued. And even though I cried and asked not to be a part of them, that was not something that he cared about. And so he took it one step further, and he said, if you don't go along with what I'm asking from you, you are really going against God, and we all sort of know where that leads if you come from the South like I do. And so it was really interesting. Like I said, it's easy to deceive children, and it seemed like maybe what he was saying was true, because I would sit on a church pew with him and my sister and my family on Sunday morning after he did the things that he would do to me on Sunday night, and so it seemed like maybe God is really on his side. And it was really traumatic. And despite the fact that I had his influence over my body and my mind for 4 years, somehow I began to discover this thing that I later learned was my solar plexus, and it said to me a very, very loud, resounding no. And so I found the strength to tell my parents what was happening, and then we soon told my siblings. But just as I had been groomed for sex by this guy, he had groomed my siblings to think that I was a liar. And that's what they thought, and it divided my family, and I was absolutely devastated. But I had no choice but to keep on going. What can you do, right? And even though I passed a polygraph test, and in 5 years he would confess, my sister would believe a version of the truth that I was completely unprepared for, one in which I was the other woman, which at 12 years old seemed like such a big word for a little girl who was crying and asking for things not to happen to her like this. And so I realized that her grudge was so much deeper than mine was, and her pain was deeper than mine. And even when I called and demanded that he make an apology to me, she said to me, well, it's funny that you should mention that, because he's actually written you a letter of apology, but I won't let him send it because I'm afraid that you'll use it as evidence to convict him of these crimes. And again, it seemed like such an incredible reversal to me that she would stand in the way of what might be real healing for me. But I knew at that time I was going to have to make my life be about something else. And I started a journey towards healing. And I was so fortunate to meet some incredible guides along the way. And one of them told me, I know this is hard, and I know you want to give up, but every day that you stand up and keep going is a day that he doesn't win. And that actually sounded pretty cool to me. And then I began to listen to the stories of other survivors, not just of sexual abuse, but of addiction and other trauma. And they inspired me, and they made me think that I could keep going. And so I did. I kept going. And I stand here today because I got this idea in my head that of all the stories I heard that inspired me, if mine can inspire one person to feel just a little bit better, then that was the most gracious revenge that I could manage in my life. And I actually think that's pretty cool. Thank you.
Robin Rhea, give her a hand. Yeah.